Yes, good evening, everybody. My name is Sven Hansen. I'm the editor of the Asia Pacific desk at taz. I welcome you to our taz talk number 228 already. And tonight it's also again a Han Sens Asiatalk. Tonight we want to discuss the coming elections in Hong Kong. As some might know, on Sunday people in Hong Kong can elect the Legislative Council, called LegCo in Hong Kong. That's the parliament. But this time, these elections, for the first time, are under a set of rules, a new set of rules pushed through by the government in Beijing. As you know, in 1997, the former British crown colony of Hong Kong was handed over to China. The city, today having about 7.5 million people, the city was promised a special status for the next 50 years and promised a high degree of autonomy according to a formula called one country, two systems. Over the last few years, and especially in 2019, there have been huge protests in Hong Kong demanding democratic reforms and rejecting the meddling by the Beijing government. Those of you who read taz, they are, I think, still aware of our reporting. We have been reporting about extensively. But as you also know now, the mass movement failed. Therefore, now we have the first elections where Beijing really is calling the shots and allowing only so-called patriotic candidates to run. We will soon discuss how democratic these patriotic elections are. But before we start, please allow me 2 remarks. As you probably all know, these talks, taz talks, are free of charge. But unfortunately, they are not free of cost. So for being able to organize more of these interesting taz talks in the future, we ask you, especially those who can afford, to please donate to our voluntary payment scheme called taztalk. At the bottom of your screen, you should see the respective links, the respective link, and then you know how to voluntary payment. We thank you very much for that. The second announcement is about your participation. You can raise questions or make comments through the chat function of your YouTube or Facebook channel, and I will then try to take up your questions later during the discussion. Overall, we have about 1 hour. Now I want to introduce our guest, Au Loong-Yu. He has been a teacher, a labor activist, a writer, and a social analyst in Hong Kong for many years. And last year, he published a book called Hong Kong in Revolt, which is dealing and analyzing the protest movement of 2014, the so-called umbrella movement, and in 2019. The book was also published in German. I will briefly show you. It's called Revolt in Hong Kong, die Protestbewegung und die Zukunft Chinas. At the end of this talk, you will get a slide where you find the book title again. So if you are interested in reading, you will also get a few more links to interesting, more information about Hong Kong. After Hong Kong's democracy movement was crushed last year, Au moved to London in last December. And since September of this year, he has a blog in German called China Watch, which is published on our taz website. So our writes in English, and volunteers from a German labor group, they translate it. So you will also get the link to his blog later. So now we start, and I'm very happy, Au, that you are here tonight. Welcome to our discussion. I want to start with a question about the current situation and the current mood in Hong Kong, now a few days before the elections on this coming Sunday. So how would you describe the situation? What signals you see how people feel in the city?
There's a very deep demoralization because of the crushing defeat we have suffered, and also because the dissolutions of many big organizations which once were were very crucial for protest from Human Rights Civil Front to Hong Kong Alliance to the biggest trade unions in Hong Kong. I mean, the Professional Teachers Trade Union. So it is crushing defeat.
Maybe one has to explain the Hong Kong Alliance is that alliance which every year organized the huge candlelight vigil on June 4th, commemorating the Tiananmen massacre.
Yes, yes, and it was most hated by Beijing. So yes, so with this great repression, and also because of the national security law, under which people who got prosecuted could have a maximum sentences to life imprisonment. So this is a very, very harsh repression. So it is, and Hong Kong people's never, never really ready for such levels of crushing the repression. So it is catastrophic. And so there is a deep demoralization. People surely feel powerless under this blow. But at the same time, what is interesting to note is that I think there is there is a survey previously that that's going to be quite. I forgot. This is very 30 or 40%. I forgot. But anyway, there's a large numbers of the respondents to the surveys saying that they are not going to vote. Mm-hmm. So and the government is trying their best to encourage the people to vote. And then you can see it's of course the government has been cracked down to the extent that people who reposting some promotion campaign to boycott the election. Yes, were also prosecuted now. So, but there is still, some kind of hidden resistance. For instance, the Social Democratic Link, one of the pan-democrat opposition, and its leader long hair, was now in prison, and it put up in the Facebook. It put up a advertisement. No, not really advertisement. It looks like just an information about all telling the readers which countries are allowing people to vote a blank vote, or to or to make to make marks on the ballot paper so that it becomes useless. So it is actually it is, of course, people understand immediately that it is telling the people either not to vote or vote a blank vote. Yeah. So it's and people are actually so in private they are forwarding and sharing messages. Like I saw a interesting cartoon, because the government, in order to promote a higher voting rate than expected, it is on the 19th, this coming Sunday, they will make all public transport free on that day to encourage people to go out to vote. So there is a cartoon showing that it is several cartoons figures, in a bus, and they say, oh, this is today is travel free. Let us go around Hong Kong just to sightseeing and do nothing except sightseeing. So this is a indirect way to people are still expressing their anger and so on.
Okay, so to make it clear, it's not only forbidden to call for a direct boycott, but also if you just talk about giving a blank ballot paper or making your ballot paper invalid will get a lot of problems.
Yeah.
So what changes have been done to election law so that people are not motivated to vote? I mean, how are the elections manufactured now by Beijing?
Well, as you know, is right now the political institutions has been so-called reformed to the extent that it's that the Democrats or any oppositions is very difficult to take part in the election, right? And because of this so kind of patriotic guideline, but also is if you we can talk about a bit of this so-called reform of the political system here. And so shall we look at the slide of the political reform?
Yes, but maybe you just explain the slide we see at the moment. So you have a few figures about people being arrested. And
right. We can do this first. Yes, actually, this is also very important because while you are on the one hand you are holding elections which is supposed to represent the Hong Kong people, but on the other hand, yes, the repression is still going on and on and on, and to scare people away from demanding for democracy. So yes, they have for 2 years between 2019 and 2021. We have seen so 10,000 people have been already being arrested and 2,600 get prosecuted. And what is more is the national security laws have been passed and in China, and then imposed in Hong Kong, and then the total 153 protesters were prosecuted under this law. And this is a very, very harsh treatment for Hong Kong people. And actually, there's already some people's comments that, well, this is even more harsh than mainland Chinese activists in this aspect, which means in China, it is not that common to prosecute dissidents under the national security law. But now it's it just hand out this prosecution and then the sentences very lightly. So and then just this February, there is a very terrible repression that they prosecuted and jailed the 47 very famous Hong Kong opposition leaders. For what? Simply for that they are holding a consultative vote among the Democratic camps, whether whom should run for elections in 2019. But this is entirely legal under Hong Kong's the basic laws. But suddenly, they got charges with conspiracy, and so on and so forth.
It was a kind of primary elections, huh?
Yes, right. The primary election. So it is and then what is, I think, what is also a very obvious repressions on the freedom of the press is it forced the Apple Daily to close down. So actually, this this scenario should not surprise us, because back in 2019 we already see, Apple Daily was being harassed by both the police and also from repeatedly from some very suspicious people with link to the gangs and so on. So yes, this is a great purge, and so this election will take place with the great purge as its backdrop, as a background. So it is very clear that the election is to purge further the whole opposition parties. It is not meant to be empowering the Hong Kong peoples or so-called improving the electoral system at all. Yeah.
So we go to the next slide, and of course we have to say before that even before the Hong Kong political system or electoral system was not really democratic. It was still a kind of colonialist system, but it was more democratic than we will see now. Can you explain the charts?
Oh yes, yes. But before that, yes, a very short briefing. Yeah. Hong Kong, yes, political system actually, I mean that after 1997, actually is a copy from the colonial governments and colonial constitution. What I mean is that where the legislature is very little power, and the executive has immense power. So that's one thing. It is entirely and the Beijing governments happily succeed this colonial structure. Yes. And secondly, the main point is that yes, both for the executive, it is always appointed by London, and what has been changed is that it is now being practically appointed by Beijing. Surely they have a some kind of so-called electoral committee to so-called elect the chief executive, but we will talk about that later. Meanwhile, yes, the legislature, yes, before this 2019 electoral reform, the old system where we have 70 seats in the legislature of a very small power, it is a very small power one. But anyway, we have half of the seats are directly elected, or nearly so. So and the other half was so-called elected by functional constituency, including, it is chiefly the commercial sectors, the professionals had a very heavy weight in this so-called functional constituency representatives. Actually, they are very similar to the Italian fascist model, that they have so-called that kind of corporate state that representatives in the legislatures is divided up by those so-called different sectors performing different economic functions. But okay, but still we have half of the seats being directly elected. But now with this 2019 new political systems, they have increased the 20 seats so as to allow those so-called the election committee to enjoy the right to appoint legislators. So, and we will talk about the election committee in a while. And then you can see, yes, for directly elected seats, we have only it's very small minorities of directly elected, and then so you can see it is a huge erosions of democratic rights, and on top of that, what more important is, on top of that, because of the change in all kinds of ways that election is held and so on. Say for instance the oath, you have to pledge an oath to the basic law and so on, and anyone who is not doing this will be disqualified. Or if you even pledge the oath, but if they find in your past records you have say something like Hong Kong's people enjoys the right to self-determination, and then you will be disqualified. So it is a humiliating process actually, because they screen you and repeatedly. So it is a very humiliating for anyone who try to run election. So yes, this is a electoral system which is entirely in the services of the Beijing's one-party dictatorship. It is not in any way could we say it is representatives of the Hong Kong people at all.
Okay, so you need the approval of a pro-Beijing committee to be allowed to run. And what does this mean now for this so-called pan-democratic camp? Pan-democratic camp, to explain, is the different parties who are part of the democracy movement. The biggest party is the Democratic Party, but nevertheless, they are also smaller parties, and they all are quite critical of how Beijing is handling Hong Kong, and they were demanding more democratic reforms. So these different parties are called the pan-democratic camp. So right. What does it mean now, these elections under the rules you just explained for the pan-democratic camp?
No democratic camp parties joined the election at all. Even the Democratic Party, which has always been seen as very moderate, they had not sent anyone to take part in the election, given this totally undemocratic political reform. So right now, I think there are a few individuals, maybe 4 or 5 years, 4 or 5 previously belong to the pan-democratic camps as individual. They are going to run as individual. Yes. But this is really just a handful of people, and no political party among the democratic camp joined the election.
What do you think about their candidacy? I mean, these 4 or 5 people, does it make sense, or why you think they are running?
Well, I do not entirely, understand the logic. I don't agree with them, because they are saying, well, there are some space to speak out, but I doubt it. Yeah, so I do not share their assessment, and I do not share their conclusion. Yes, but we will see. But I don't think, because if you look at these 5 persons, they are really only one of them was a former legislator, and she was never never popular. She's never really is key leaders in the pan-democrats at all. So basically speaking, yes, we may say that all pan-democrat parties are actually and practically boycotting the election.
Those who are running, are they kind of providing legitimacy for these elections?
Well, at least anyone who is suspicious about this, they have a case to make. And these 5 persons who decided to run, well, we will observe what are they going to do next. But I don't think many people share their optimistic assessment at all.
But I think from Beijing's point of view, it would make sense if at least one got elected. I mean, to provide credibility to the whole system.
I don't think it worked. I don't think it really worked. Of course, it's those who are really in in power in Hong Kong. Not Carrie Lam. She's just a puppet. I think the one who the National Security Board Committee from Beijing, who really have real power over Hong Kong now. Well, they they don't care whether it is credible or not.
Okay, so
they just find someone that could run elections from the Democrats, and then they can fill in a good report and for the supervisors, saying that okay, looks like there are some people from the yellow camp to join the election. That's all. But this is not credibility.
So you think they are going for 100% loyal parliament, legislature?
Yeah, even if it's not 100%, it will be 99, 98. There's really no substantial difference at all.
Okay, let's have a look back. We had the huge protest movement in 2014, the so-called umbrella movement, and then we had this, in 2019 fighting the extradition law. How would you describe Hong Kong's former democracy movement, this pan-democratic camp? What type of people were there, and how would you characterize it, and where you see strengths and weaknesses of that movement?
Yes, the strength and weakness of the democratic movement. I think yes. I think the strength of the pan-democratic movements in the past 40 years, broadly speaking, yes, because of for whatever reason, it has grown more and more popular, and got more and more support throughout these 40 years of history. It is interesting to note one thing, that yes, in 1991, when the British government here held the first direct election, partially actually, in Hong Kong, and then yes, by that time the forerunner of the Democratic parties got got most of the seats, and then these the party leaders marched to the governors of Hong Kong by the time, Chris Patten, and demand that they should be their parties elected legislators should be named, should be yes appointed as a part of the governor's cabinet. But what is funny is the next day, many people in phone-in program, many people, probably most of them may be just ordinary people, but actually condemn the party for being too aggressive. That saying that you are not qualified to be part of the government yet. You should just be the legislators to monitor the government. So it is not accidental, because I think by that time the Hong Kong people's democratic awareness was still very rudimentary actually. But I think throughout these years, especially after 1970s, one can see the broadening of democratic awareness. And that is why eventually, so when this aggression from Beijing becomes clear, very, very clear as daylight, and the people were angered. First, you can see that in 2014, and then there's you can see there's a final showdown. It is not really prepared battle. It is not really, you know, people. It is not really led by any big political parties. No, it is not entirely 100% spontaneous, but it is largely the momentum has a very strong spontaneity. And why? Because the people are angry, and the people now understood that well, if you don't fight, you will be the same fate as you know, in Xinjiang and in other parts of China, where people absolutely have no right at all. So yes, this is the strength of the democratic movement, that throughout 40 years of its existence, it did broaden, it did have a larger and larger base, and therefore, this is important because anyone who talk about foreign forces, well, you have read my book. I always argue that, of course, there are foreign forces.
Yeah, but I think we come to that later. Huh?
Okay, yes, we'll come to that later.
I think we are more or less through with this structure of the setup of the election. I think we should switch off the PowerPoint. Is that okay?
Yes, yeah? Okay, yeah.
And, coming back to the movement, I mean, it is really impressively broad, but maybe that's a problem. I mean, you had independent labor activists, you had student groups, you had middle-class professionals, but you also had, which was very strange for us, you had kind of conservative people waving American flags, stars and stripes flags, and others, more radical young people, demanding Hong Kong independence. So this broad scope of the movement, was it a problem or was it more a strength?
I think it is both. It is strength and it is also weakness, which means you know, it's I think yes, that this movement is gigantic. 2 million people, you know, so march to the streets with the same demand, and it is the 5 demands which define the movement, which define the unity of these 2 million.
So they could agree on 5 demands, which is
yes,
that's something. No?
Yes, yes. So this is there's a great diversity, but at the same time, there is a great unity. And this unity of these 5 demands, I would challenge anyone who argue against the legitimacy of these 5 demands. And those people who still today, if they try to support Beijing rather than the Hong Kong people, they are on the wrong side of the history. Because the Hong Kong movement is first and foremost defined by these 5 demands. And one of them, the key one, is universal suffrage. And it is entirely unfair for any Europeans who dismiss this movement as simply, you know, so-called foreign forces, agitated.
But that's not the argument of Beijing.
Pardon?
That's not the argument of Europeans, but that's mostly the argument of Beijing. That
yes. Oh, I mean, because I'm sorry, I am skipping too much because I also met occasionally. Because I was in France just some 2 weeks ago. Yes, I met. I also met people who are repeating the Beijing's argument actually. But let us go back to what we are talking about. So it is So it is, but at the same, at the same time, it is a movement with great diversity, which means, yes, there are people who are pro-Trump, yes, but at the same time, if you look carefully, they are also not strong enough. This is also what I think is regrettable. But there are people who do not entirely support this kind of pro-Trump's agenda. For instance, yes, there was also a 3,000 or 4,000 people's rally in support of the Catalonia's independence movement. And before the rallies, those pro-Trump supporters argued that, oh no, we shouldn't support it because Trump wouldn't support that. And then those who are supportive of this rally rebutted those pro-Trump supporters. What, you know, we are. Well, how could we not support the Catalonian peoples when we share the same the same kind of very bleak future that's being crushed by central governments without recognizing your minorities' rights. So this there is always this kind of tension, but surely because these pro-Trump peoples have also enjoy the support of a tabloid, which, well, it makes this the loudest voice. But do not forget that there are rallies with thousands of people who are waving the American flag. But here we must also distinguish between those, I always say, those new hands, young people who are inexperienced in politics, who joined the protest movement for the first time in their life or the second time in their life. They have no ideas of international politics. And but there are also diehard, people who do support Trump. But do not forget that in huge rallies like the 2 million march and so on, there's comparing to those people who waving the American flag, they are just a minority.
Two people who were prominently featured by media in Europe were Joshua Wong and Jimmy Lai.
Yeah.
So what do you think of them? What role did they play in the movement? Did they deserve this prominent role which was given to them by European media, or were they just not that important?
It's interesting, to compare these two persons, yes, as well, because I think what is interesting, and it's also related to the topic we just talked about. What's interesting is that where Jimmy Lai and his media is quite pro-Trump, but actually Joshua Wong is not that pro-Trump. And actually, I forgot whether it's the end of 2019 or the beginning of 2020. Joshua Wong posted a comment on Trump supporters, and saying that he did not agree with Jimmy Lai's open support of Trump's candidacy for president, or for the person in general, and so on. He publicly expressed that his disagreement over this, and he said yes, which is nothing wrong with that we seek international support, but we should be doing this on a bipartisan base, and to support Trump is not appropriate at all. So, you can see there are differences between the two persons.
Yeah, of course. Okay, we will come back to the US-China rivalry later. Let's come back to what you think. What mistake did the democracy movement, the protest movement, make? I mean, it got crushed. So what did go wrong from their side? Or would you say they would never have a chance because they were just the David and Beijing the Goliath? But what went wrong? What mistakes did the protest movement make?
Well, yes, I think the biggest mistake is that I think for those people who disagree with the right wing or pro-Trump current, there's lots of people who disagree with them actually. I think, but the biggest mistake is that, including parties, say, for instance, the Democratic Party has always has a link with the American establishment, but they are always kind of also, towing the lines of bipartisan. Yeah, but I don't think that they were that silly to be entirely 100% support Trump. But anyway, but the problem is here that many people Democrat parties or say intellectuals or liberal scholars who are working with the Democratic movement for a long time, they keep a distance from this pro-Trump current. But there is no, they are not outspoken. They tolerate them, practically speaking. They do not speak against them openly. And that is tragic. I think they should have spoke against this kind of pro-Trump's voices. If they did, I think they would be much louder than those who wave the flag in the streets. But the problem is they did not, and this does not surprise me either. I think because I think it's in some way it reflects what I said in my book. It's a kind of conservatism in the Hong Kong society. There's a deep conservatism here. So I have no time to deal on this topic, but this conservatism makes makes those peoples are not confident in arguing against this conservative mentality. Say, for instance, you can't really argue against xenophobia. As a leftist and as a Democrat, well, I think it is just common sense that as a Democrat, you have to be against any forms of racism. And of course, there is some kind of xenophobia within the movement. They are not the majority. No, they are not. They never have been. But the problem is they are very vocal. But the people who does not accept this kind of extremism, not extremism. They do not accept, even if they do not accept, some signs of xenophobia, they do not openly speak against it. So this kind of because they do not have the confidence to go against this conservatism. So yeah, it is a weakness. But I would say I would dare to say that the crushing defeat. This mistake is not what lead us to this crushing defeat, because fundamentally speaking, Beijing would not tolerate Hong Kong autonomy for long. Its agenda to destroy Hong Kong has been written on the walls decades before. A decade, at least, a decade before the 2019 revolt. It is, in essence.
To make clear, that is about, you're elaborating this in your recent blog, so you will later get the link on the taz website. You're arguing in that direction. No? So just want to say to the audience that they can follow this up, yes. In your book, you argue that on the one hand, the movement was very spontaneous, and that's a strength. On the other hand, the spontaneity is a weakness. So there's not enough organizing. But now we have the situation that all organizations which have been there, like the independent trade unions, like the Alliance, I mean, you mentioned them before, that they are all dissolved.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that even that would not have helped, as the rules are the way that you cannot keep your organization if your leaders would be put in jail under this new law.
Yeah, but the issue here is it is not entirely dead, not yet, because the Confederation of Trade Unions is disbanded. Yes, it is a.
Yes. And its leader is in jail. Lee Chok-yan is in jail. Yeah.
Yes, yes, but do not forget that there's the 90s trade unions which affiliated to Confederation of Trade Union are still there. You know, only the umbrella organization is disappeared, but the base are still there. So whether and I think, of course, the Beijing could also finish them, you know, one by one very soon. But at least there is some time to buy, you know, to that there are still 80 or 90s trade unions are still there, and above and on top of that, there are also very many. Hong Kong is very has a lot of NGOs, has a lot of civil associations. They are still largely there. So surely the 97 generation or the young people generally do not belong to this kind of organization in general.
Yes.
Yeah, but it is here. And this is also one of the weaknesses shown there, because the young people without any organization, they have no strength at all. But there are still lots of civil associations and trade unions. And do not forget that yes, in the 2019 revolt, that's what I say is quite a scene to see. You know, a spontaneous movement suddenly promoted a new trade union movement. You know, with 50 or 60 at least new trade unions being formed, and these trade unions, some as small minorities is dissolved or put into inactive, but many are still there. So they are just, you know, right now it's demoralized, disoriented, and so on. But I think some of them will still try to do something in the near future. And already they have been doing already. So it is not entirely, you know, the civil society, the opposition is not entirely gone. But of course, we don't have much time. This is true.
Okay, let's come back to the international level. I mean, which role did the so-called West, I mean the US, but also the UK and the EU, what role did they play? And should Western governments, and especially I think the British, should they have protested much more?
Well, I hope so, yeah. But of course, we should get it right. Huh? Yeah, I think to be honest, the Western government's agenda, yeah, even if they are kind of supportive of the Hong Kong democratic movement, their agendas are not necessarily, you know, coincide with the Hong Kong people entirely. No, it is we should have some kind of skepticism over this. Of course, yes, we welcome, you know, the support they have, and I think this offering the BNO's yes holders a way to.
One has to explain. And BNO is British National Overseas Passport. That is a special passport for Hong Kong people, which gives them certain rights, but not fully the citizenship rights of British people. So it's a neo-colonial passport. You might get the British citizenship, but first you are kind of second-class citizen with a right to vote in Britain. But I think you have to explain these expressions.
Yes, sorry, yes, but now you know. Okay, yes, but anyway, yes, their agendas are not entirely coincide with us, but I think the most important thing is that the Hong Kong people themselves, or the diasporas themselves, have to self-strengthening themselves before they can set their own agenda. Because right now, with this collapse of the opposition in Hong Kong and the diasporas in overseas, they are struggling to survive and so on. The situation doesn't look very good. But I don't think we should give up our struggle. And here, I think we must strengthen ourselves. And first of all, it is a politically self-strengthening, which means, we had made mistake before. So what is the way forward? How are we going to demand democracy from Beijing, but without any elements of xenophobia? So it is very important that the democratic movements really reiterates its commitments to genuine democratic values.
Coming back to this international sphere, I think my impression was that the US sees it as Hong Kong as a kind of tool or some instrument to somehow blame Beijing and reject Beijing's growing power. And the British in those days, they were totally occupied with their Brexit, so they didn't care very much. So how is the situation today? I mean, is Hong Kong now part of a broader struggle for hegemony in Asia between the US and China? And if so, does Hong Kong have a chance at all? Or is it, I mean, how you say, when two elephants are fighting, the grass gets trampled. Is Hong Kong now the grass which got trampled?
Well, I'm afraid so. And that, this also exposed the weakness of those right-wing localists because they have been advocating that so-called the scorched earth tactic. So they think it is a good idea that we just pursue the tactics of so-called we burn, you burn with us. But the problem now is very clear. Beijing doesn't burn, and we are burning. Mm-hmm. So given this huge asymmetries of forces between Beijing and Hong Kong, I think to elevate a concrete tactics, so-called scorch the earth tactics, to elevate this to the levels of strategy or even principle is silly. So yes, we shouldn't have to do that either. But well, we are where we are now. To sum up, I think it's very important that the Hong Kong people must see that we must seek allies, not only in the international scene, but also among the mainland Chinese democratic movement. However weak it is.
The effect on the Chinese social movement, democratic movement, what effect did the crushing of Hong Kong have on the people in the mainland?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, that would be my final question about what effect does the crushing of the democracy movement in Hong Kong have on the people in China, those who are aspiring for democratic changes, for opening up, for a stronger civil society? What effect did that have?
Well, there's a huge effect, but I think it is not visible enough for international audience in general, because what we must start from a departure point is that the mainland social movement actually has been intertwining with the Hong Kong for more than 20 years.
Yes.
This is very important point because I won't say it is entirely because of Hong Kong, of course not, but the Hong Kong Civil Association, of course, no political party is possible to be active in mainland China. I mean the Hong Kong one, but the Hong Kong, all kinds of civil association, from gender association, from labor NGO to community work, and so on and so forth. Yes, has been either opening centers in mainland China or collaborating with mainland partners and so on. So there has always been an intertwining of mainland Chinese civil society and Hong Kong one. So but the crushing of this Hong Kong opposition and social movement in general actually is also pronounces the death for now, right? The death of mainland Chinese civil society. Surely it has already been dying since 2015. But say, for instance, in Hong Kong, there have been around 10 labor groups in Hong Kong, which is solely committed to support China labor action or advocacy. But now most of them either were dissolved or has to deactivate their operation and so on and so forth. And actually, this is one may even argue that yes, Beijing's agenda to finish off Hong Kong's autonomy is precisely to exterminate the Chinese growing social discontent and also, all kinds of social activism. For instance, this is very clear if one look back for the past 20 years that yes, at first millions of rural migrant workers know nothing of their rights, and they were exploited in a very cruel way, and so on and so forth. But then after some kind of activism, both in mainland, launched by both mainland activists and with the help of some Hong Kong groups and so on, we have been witnessing a raising of awareness among the rural migrant workers of their own rights. So we have lots of spontaneous strike at the turn of the century until 2015, when the Beijing's finish off the many lawyers and also many labor groups and so on. So the death of Hong Kong first and foremost also means the death of China's civil society and autonomous organization and so on. For now, for now. So,
okay, we are coming to an end, but before we end, there's one question by a listener. Ripley Jones asks, will there be an NGO or INGO law coming up in Hong Kong soon? I mean, a law restricting the activities of NGOs according to the national security law. I mean, are you expecting that? That you mentioned that there are still many organizations around, but that they will get more restricted, and also in their capacity to engage civil society in the mainland?
Yes. What I know of, yes, that there are still a more low profile activities going on, and it's just a handful of people here and handful of people there and so on. But say, for instance, there are still fragmented, but quite many people are doing is, say, for instance, coordinating people to write letters to those imprisoned democratic opposition. to encourage them and so on. So it is this kind of resistance, these kinds of useful work are still underway. So at large, one can say that the visible opposition is dead. But
yeah, but the question is, will that be possible in the future, or will there be more restrictions by local NGO law according to the national security law in Hong Kong?
Well, this is a question that I can't answer because we are now, surely right now is the Beijing has not yet finished off all civil association and self-organization, not yet. And whether it will go that far is unclear. But it is quite possible, given the fact that the Pandora box is already opened. And what I mean is the Pandora box of the bureaucratic politics within the Communist Party. I can't go into detail, but what I mean is that you have now a situation where what I call the logic of this kind of mechanism, that the worst bureaucrats, the most cruel bureaucrats will get promoted, and those who are slightly less cruel, they will be pushed out. So in some way, yes, we will. Hong Kong now is ruled by this kind of worst bureaucrats. So I'm not optimistic, but I think but one must be aware of one thing too. Yes, this is also what I wrote in my book, that yes, China's situations determines that yes, there's going to be big surprises in the future. It is highly unpredictable, but prepare for surprises. And who knows, right? Okay,
I think that was a good final sentence. Let's hope for positive surprises. Overall, it was not that optimistic what you told us, but I think we could follow quite well your explanation. So I want to thank you for sharing your views and insights with us. To the audience, I can promise that tomorrow, we will promise an article by our Beijing correspondent, Fabian Kretschmer, about the forthcoming election. So in the Friday issue of our paper, we have another article about the elections on Sunday. And this was the last Asiatalk for this year, but not the last taztalk. So tomorrow there will be another taztalk, the final one for this year. It will be by Katrin Gottschalk and Jan Feddersen. The German title is Über das Müssen. I think it's a series they have already about controversial points of view. So stay tuned. And I want to thank my colleagues from the technical support in the background and also the marketing department. And of course, I want to thank you for watching and one question. And now at the end, you will see a slide with the title of our blog. The book there are two versions, one in English, one in German. And the blog is in German only. And then you find a link to all the other former Asiatalks, those digital versions. And again, you find, and please take it seriously, a link to our voluntary payment scheme, taztalk. So I thank you very much for attending. I hope it was interesting for you. And we hope that sooner or later, we will have also more positive developments to tell. And thanks again. And keep in contact. And we might continue that at a later date. So many thanks.
Thank you for this. Yeah. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.